Last update, we had been spending some time in Dole and been making our way along the Doubs and the Rhona Inn heading towards Strasbourg for our winter mooring. Our next stop was Besançon. The old town of Besançon is on a hilltop and with the Doubs looping around it. You can see the wall of the citadel from the water as you're arriving. When you get there, you have two options. You can either continue around the canal around the town or you can go through a lock and a tunnel which is carved into the rock under the town. We chose to go through the tunnel. Our plan for Besançon was to spend a week or two just exploring the town, the history, the sights, and relaxing. We spent one day exploring the citadel, which included getting the little tourist train up, as it was another really hot week, and to get to the top it's all uphill. And we had a great lunch while we were there. For some reason there's a little mini zoo at the citadel which had kangaroos, so of course we went to say g'day to those. And while we were there, another Aussie came with his kids to say g'day. Besançon's a larger town, it's got a big student population, so there's a bit more going on. Had a cinema showing movies in English with French subtitles, so we escaped the heat one afternoon and watched the Odyssey. Chatting to our neighbour though last week at the port, he asked if we'd seen the sign in the Capitanary's office about the closure of the canal. And the notice was that a section ahead of us would be closing from the 8th to the 18th of August due to the ongoing water issues. We debated whether we should stay in Besançon until the 19th and then move on, or move on and get past the section being closed before the 8th. We decided to move on as there's been no decent rainfall or forecast, and we thought it best to get ahead of the closure in case it's extended. And the journey from Besançon to Strasbourg is 327 k's. Our aim was to get as far as Mulhouse, which is 154 k's, getting us almost halfway. On the first day, we made it as far as Lacy and were able to moor in at about 5 o'clock. The locks closed about 6, so we stayed at the lock gate and tied on there. We didn't think there'd be anybody coming through, which would be a problem. There'd been no traffic at all. It was a good little spot. We got to have another swim in the Doubs to cool down. That afternoon though, at 4:30, we received an email from the VNF advising that the section ahead of us, either side of the town of Montbéliard, would be closed from 7 a.m. the following morning. And we'd hoped to get through there to Mulhouse before the closure on the 8th, but there was no way we could do that now. It was closed the following morning. They'd brought it forward, so we now needed to decide if we'd stop or if we'd turn around and go back to Besançon. We decided to push on. We wanted to get closer to the closed section and be in a good spot to move on when the canal reopened, and we had two options, Baume-Les-Dames or l'Île-sur-le-Doubs. And we needed a mooring with power and water, as the closure advice was that the canal wouldn't reopen on the 18th. The estimate was now the 30th of September, and that'll depend on any rain. So our journey to Baume-Les-Dames, at the last lock before we got here, we couldn't get the lock to activate to let us in, and we tied onto the waiting pontoon and took the opportunity to clear the weed hatch, biggest haul of weeds we've had yet. We thought we'd left the weeding behind when we sold the property in Kundabung, but no. So while I cleaned the weed hatch, Tony walked up to the lock to see why it wasn't triggering for us to enter. And what he found was there was a boat ahead of us that had exited the lock, and it was a cabin cruiser style boat, and they'd become stuck on the canal bed because they sit lower in the water than us and there's hardly any water. Their only option, they couldn't go forward and they couldn't move out of our way, so their only option was to reverse back into the lock, reactivate it, and reverse back out and get back onto the River Doubs and head back to Besançon, I suppose. So once they had moved out, we could then go into the lock. And when we came out the other side, we just saw how low the water was, and we were kind of, we were touching in places. So we didn't want to risk travelling further along and getting stuck somewhere, particularly without power and water, or even in a decent sized town. So we're now here in Baume-Les-Dames, the canal behind me, hopefully only until October. However, Europe is experiencing a significant drought, and we may end up being here for the rest of the year. There are about 15 boats here, however we'll soon be one of only 2 that have people on board. The other owners have left their boats and gone home, and they'll come back when the canals reopen. So we've met some of the locals. The guy in the water in the pictures here, like young kid, he dropped his phone in there and had to jump in and try and salvage it. He's only standing up in the water and it's about 1 metre deep, but he was a bit wussy and he didn't want to put his head under and use his hands to feel around. They came back again later with a magnet. We lent them our net and they tried using that. They came back last night at about 10:30 and had torches trying to find it, and they haven't been able to find it. It's under the weed and the sludge. He needs to get in and feel around, but he won't do it. So anyway, here we are, and we'll use our time here relaxing. We'll do some maintenance jobs on the boat, which may include repainting the tread on the sides and the roof. And we need to have a balance of relaxing and keeping occupied in case we're here indefinitely. But for now, it's the end of September that we'll be stuck here, unless we get rain and something changes, but otherwise it's Baume-Les-Dames for now, indefinitely. Hopefully still to get to Strasbourg before the end of the year.